Joseph. I'm one of the ERP specialists here at Bluehub, and today I'm going to be running through with you the main questions we get around the reference books within the system and how these reference books work, how different elements of these reference books can help you in terms of manipulating data and allocating data going into Xero. Some of the main questions you do get around your tax rules and how they can be set up and changed, payment terms and how they work within the system, default values and how they work in the system as well for when setting up products and customers, and a pretty standard one is just units of measure and how you can actually interpret them within the system. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into our settings and we're going to go into reference books. So if we go into our tax rules just down here, and we just open this up. If you are connected into Xero or QuickBooks, ideally your tax rules should be identical between the two platforms for the ones which are active and currently being used. Each of these tax rules within the system will serve a different purpose and how that data is to work, how the tax is to be calculated. Most commonly you would have, especially for UK customers, a 5% VAT, a non or exempt VAT product and a 20% VAT product. Whether that's on expenses, whether that's on income for sales, that's to be decided per product. But from here what we can do is we can actually allocate and go into one of these tax rules and change some of the settings and how this works. So with this 20% VAT on income, if we open this up here, we get a few different options on how this tax rule is to be calculated in the system. One of the most common ones to change here is this tax rule calculating inclusive or exclusive? Is it going to be adding on VAT or is the VAT already included in the product? Second one here to link to your tax types inside of Xero is going to be what tax type this is assigned to. The practice we normally follow is the tax type has the same name as the tax rule, so they can be linked nice and easily. And lastly here is the liability account. We've had a few clients in the past, based on their integrations and their setup, will assign different liability accounts for their tax rates based on the integration it's connected into. So if you're selling on Amazon, for instance, you may use a different tax account and then assign that VAT for the Amazon sales into a different account for filtering and reporting inside of Xero. And then lastly down here is just to assign the tax component with the correct VAT rate. So if you're indicated this to be a 20% product or a 20% VAT, you can then change your rate at the bottom. If we now go back into settings and if we go into reference books, the second one we normally get asked is going to be our payment terms. So within our payment terms down here, you have an indication of a few different methods of how payment terms work. Most commonly you'll have 30, 90, 60 or pro forma as your number of days. However, your method will change based on those terms. The different methods we have access to is plainly just the number of days. Is it 30 days, 60 days from the point of invoice? Is it a certain day of the month following? So the day of the next month, is it always the 14th of the month after? Is it the last day of the next month? And if we select the last day of the next month here, we can see our duration in days is not applicable because it's always going to be standard and go against the calendar. We then have our last option down here, which is days since the end of month. So since the end of this month, how many days after that? These are the only methods that work inside of Cin7 Core. A lot of people will have, and companies will have deposits and 30% upfront, 50% upfront, and then you're on terms from there. That bit has to be handled separately outside of the system. You are limited to these methods inside of Cin7 Core. On the right hand side here, you can indicate are these particular payment terms active. So we only have a few of these active within the system. And is this payment term a default in the system? Is it a default one when setting up customers or setting up sales orders? The third question we normally get asked with our reference books, if I go into settings and reference books again, if we scroll down this list here, is units of measure. Units of measure in itself is a very simple process in how it actually works, and it follows a very standard procedure. It's purely what you want to count your product as within the system. By default, Cin7 Core will use the unit of measure item, so it's just one item. However, we always try and make sure clients have an understanding of how these units of measure work and how it can actually help stock counts and looking at your availability. If we sell a pack of items or a singular of an item, what is the unit of measure of that item? Am I counting individual items? Am I counting packs of 10? Am I counting packs of 12 or the 20 pack in this case? When you see 100 on hand, what is that 100 on hand of? Is it 100 packs? Is it 100 singles? Is it 100 bottles of a certain literage of product? Just having a unit of measure that gives you some sort of description helps identify those numbers very easily. Most importantly, if you have new members of staff and they're just looking at stuff on a screen, it allows for that translation of what that product could actually be. So for our last one here, if we go into settings and if we go into reference books, if we now scroll down to the bottom of the page, we have our option for our default values. Default values are applicable for products, customers, and suppliers, and they only apply when creating a new entity for these different types. If we go into the product, for instance, we get a few different options of what we can always set up as the default. So if you are a dropshipping business, you may always want the option to always be dropshipping this item so it can't be misselected. If you always use a certain attribute in the system like we do with our additional attribute set, we always set product up, we always want to make sure this is the default attribute set within the system. Same applies for your costing method. If you are only dealing with FIFO items, you may always just want to default a FIFO product so you're not misselecting anything in the system. If we go back into our reference books and we'll just take a look at the customers and supplier versions as well. Within our customer here, if you're purely UK based, you may only just deal with the currency of GBP, which you can then select. If you only deal with one pricing tier, instead of selecting a pricing tier which is blank, you may always want to select the trade or the RRP price. From here, again, because it potentially is UK based, you may want to select the tax rule to always be 20% as well. And then the same process for your additional attribute set at the bottom. And if we just have a look at the last one here, which is our suppliers. In our supplier setup here, there's only a few different options, but the same process applies for your currency, your tax rules, and potentially your payment terms. So in terms of the reference books here, these are the main questions we kind of get asked on a weekly and a monthly basis. If there's anything which I've missed from this list and you want to be covered in a future video, or if you just have general questions on how these options work inside of the reference books, please put your comments below and we can get back to you. If you have any questions around anything else, please let us know as well, and I will see you in the next video.